Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In the course of this video lesson, I'll be solving different practice questions that cut across different topics in biology. Now let's get into the first practice question, and it says, which of the following does a virus? This particular word in this question is very important. So which of the following does a virus have in common with animal cells? Wow, so this question is asking us to determine the following that is common between viruses and animal cells. So first of all, it is important for us to describe what a virus is. Listen carefully. The first thing I have to do here is to describe to you what a virus actually looks like. So listen carefully. In the course of the explanation of the virus structure, I'm going to put the diagram of a virus here so you see what I'm talking about. So listen carefully. First of all, the way I'm going to describe a virus is by saying that viruses are not living. I know you are like surprised. Why did I say that? I'm going to justify that statement. So listen carefully. Viruses are not living, but they are simply packets of hereditary materials that are wrapped in a coat of proteins. Now, basically, what I'm saying here, you will see the diagram to what I'm, actually explaining. There is no space on the board, so I'm going to put the diagram of a virus, and when I explain a concept, I'm going to show you here in the diagram. So listen carefully. So the first thing I said that viruses are not living. I'm going to justify that statement. The reason I actually said that is this. Actually, in some cases, viruses are living. In some other cases, viruses are non-living. Why is this so? That'll be the question you ask me. Now, this must be noted. When a virus is found outside a living host, let's say a virus is found in a non-living environment, that is when that virus will be regarded to be called a non-living organism. I believe you are following me, because now the virus is found in a non-living environment. Let's say, for instance, this is a marker. Let's say a virus is on top of this marker, for instance. So what will I say? Will I say that since this virus is on top of the marker, will this virus be living? No, it will not be living. It will be non-living. Why? Because this marker is non-living. I believe you are following me. But let's say that virus is now found inside where life exists. Let's say that virus is now found inside a living organism, or inside a human, inside an animal. Then we say that virus is living.
You can see we've agreed that when a virus is found in a living environment, that virus becomes living, and this is when that virus can now cause a disease. Are you there? When a virus is in a non-living environment, it cannot cause a disease. But as soon as that virus finds itself in a living environment, that is when it cannot cause disease. It cannot reproduce. Are you there? So all this must be noted.
I believe you are following. Now, this must be noted also about virus. Now, you can see I've described that when a virus is found outside a living cell, outside a living host, we say that virus is non-living. Actually, we don't call them viruses anymore when they are found outside that living host. We call them virion. Please listen. When a virus is found outside a living host, we already know that that virus will be non-living, hence it will be called virion. Are you there? But what we are interested in to solve this question is to understand how the structure of a virus looks like, to now see what is common between viruses and animal cells. Are you there? Because that's what the question is all about. But it's important for you to understand the overview of the virus structure, because they can ask you any other question that pertains to the virus. Are you there? Now, this must be noted. It must be noted here that viruses, I said that they are non-living, and also they are simply packets of hereditary materials. You can see that was what I said earlier in this class lesson. So you can see that viruses are not living, but they are simply packets of hereditary materials. What is this hereditary materials? These hereditary materials can be either DNA or can also be either RNA. Remember, DNA is called deoxyribonucleic acid. Look at it. Deoxyribo, that's the D. Nucleic, that's the N, and A is acid. So DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, whereby RNA is the ribonucleic acid. So as earlier said, viruses are not living, but they are simply packets of hereditary materials. So inside the structure of the virus, we have what we call hereditary materials. And these hereditary materials are either DNA or RNA strands. Are you there? And they also told us that these hereditary materials, which are DNA and RNA, are basically covered by a protein coat. And actually, that protein coat that covers this DNA and RNA strand, we call them capsid. You see the structure here on the board, you understand? So what covers the DNA and RNA strand is basically called capsid. And also, that capsid is made up of protein molecules called capsome. Are you there? There are other structures in a virus, but all these I just said is very important. Now, another thing you must know about viruses is that viruses can be of two forms. All right, we have what we call the DNA viruses and RNA viruses. Are you there? A virus does not contain both DNA and RNA. You can say I said DNA or RNA. So basically, you must understand here that viruses can be in the DNA form or in the RNA form.
All right, so you can see that we've established that viruses can be in two forms. We have DNA viruses and as well as we have RNA virus. You can see where the DNA is located in this, structure of a virus. So if this virus was to be an RNA virus, that place you are seeing DNA, it will not be there, then you'll be seeing RNA. So I believe you understand how all this works. Moving further, a virus structure has different parts. You can see where the genetic strand is found. You get that forms the head, and also we have the tail part of a virus. You can see it from the diagram here. You can see for the head, it is made up of the genetic strand, which can be either DNA or RNA, and as well as what covers the head, and it's called capsid. We've established on that. And as well as the tail part, which has different parts. We have the tail shield. You can see the shield there. You can see the tail fiber and other parts of a virus. So all this must be noted.
Moving further, you can see I said that viruses can be of two forms. We have the DNA viruses and as well as the RNA viruses. Remember I said that viruses, they don't have both DNA and RNA in them. But for animal cells have both DNA and RNA. Animal cells have DNA, animal cells have RNA in them. But listen carefully. In this question, they are asking us, which of the following does a virus have in common with animal cells? I just told you that viruses have DNA or RNA strands, and same applies to animal cells. They have both DNA and RNA strands in them. So what becomes the answer to this question? Is it nucleus, is it DNA, is it glycogen, or cytoplasm? I've done the explanation to this question, so you can tell me the answer. The answer to this question becomes option B, because it is actually DNA that is common to both viruses and animal cells. Let's say, for instance, DNA was not here, they wrote RNA. That will still be the answer to the question. I have said that both DNA and RNA strands, they are both common structures that are found between viruses and animal cells. Are you there? Before we end question 1, it is important for you to know the examples of DNA viruses and also examples of RNA viruses. Moving further, examples of DNA viruses include what we call the herpes virus. Herpes virus basically is responsible in causing what we call cold sore and as well as genital herpes. Are you there? So all these are caused by the herpes virus. We have another example of DNA virus, which is the varicella zoster virus. This virus causes what we call chicken pox. There is also another example of the DNA virus, which include the HPV, called the human papilloma virus. This virus causes what we call warts. All right, you see the diagram of all of these, disease condition. Warts sometimes is associated with what we call cervical cancer. All right, cancer of the cervix, and this happens to females. Are you there? Because females have what we call cervix. Are you there? Which is basically the neck of the uterus or the womb that carries or holds the baby, you understand, during pregnancy. Moving further, we have other examples of DNA viruses, which include the adenovirus. This one causes respiratory infections. Are you there? Not just respiratory infections, it also causes conjunctivitis, which is popularly regarded to be called
pink eyes.
all right, moving further to the next DNA virus. That virus is called the hepatitis B virus. Remember, the hepatitis B virus is associated with the liver, so it causes what we call chronic liver infections. Are you there? So all these are examples of the DNA viruses, whereby we have examples of the RNA viruses, which include the HIV, which is the human immunodeficiency virus that causes AIDS, which is the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. There are also examples of the RNA virus, which include the coronavirus that causes what we call COVID-19. Are you there? And also we have other examples like the influenza virus that causes flu. There are other examples which include the rhinovirus. Rhinovirus is another example of the RNA virus that causes common cold. And lastly, there is another example of the RNA virus, which is called the Ebola virus. Ebola virus causes what we call hemorrhagic Ebola fever. So all this must be noted. Let's get into the next practice question.
To have more understanding about chemistry calculations and solving all of these type of questions, I already have them on the chemistry masterpiece, okay, which is calculations and keynotes in chemistry. So if you are preparing to write the JAMB exam, this book is very, very important for you. Now, for more information getting the chemistry masterpiece, do well to direct message me via my WhatsApp number. It will be on the screen.
The next question says, the end product of glycolysis in plants and animals is. First of all, before we answer this question, it is important for you to know where this word is coming from, which is called glycolysis. Actually, glycolysis is a stage in what we call respiration, specifically a part of respiration which is called aerobic respiration. Respiration can be of two types when we talk about oxygen as a requirement. All right, we have the aerobic respiration and as well as the anaerobic respiration. From the word aerobic respiration, it is a type of respiration that occurs in the presence of oxygen, whereby for anaerobic, it is a type of respiration that occurs without oxygen. But you must know here that glycolysis is a part of aerobic respiration. This must be noted. Glycolysis is a part of what? Aerobic what? Respiration. And not just glycolysis, there is also another process that occurs during aerobic respiration, and that one is called Krebs cycle. So there are two important processes that occur under aerobic respiration, which include glycolysis and another process called the Krebs cycle. All right, this is called the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle has another name. If you don't call it the Krebs cycle, you can as well call it what we call the CAC cycle. CAC cycle, all right. CAC actually means carboxylic acid cycle. Are you there? CAC, C, the first is carboxylic, and the A here means acid, and the last C means cycle. So we call it carboxylic acid cycle. Are you there? If you want to call it CAC, also called Krebs cycle, you can as well call it the TCA cycle. All right. TCA simply means Tri, alright, C is tri, and C is carboxylic, and A is acid. Are you there? So all these are the names for Krebs cycle. What's Krebs cycle? Krebs cycle is a very important process that helps in the production of energy, alright, majorly. There are other things Krebs cycle produces, but I am not talking about Krebs cycle right now. We'll be focusing on glycolysis, but you should know that Krebs cycle is a part of aerobic respiration, and these are the other names: citric acid cycle or tricarboxylic acid cycle. Are you there? It's a cycle. If they draw it for you, see that it's actually a cycle. But let's talk about glycolysis. I did not tell you that glycolysis is a cycle. I'm going to tell you what glycolysis is all about, and as we talk about the end product which the question is asking about. Now, this must be noted about glycolysis. So, from the word lysis, it means you're actually breaking down something. So the question you ask yourself, what are you breaking down? Actually, in glycolysis, glucose is broken down. Remember, glucose is a 6-carbon sugar. Now, what are 6-carbon sugars called? They are called hexoses. 5-carbon sugars, they are called pentoses. Are you there? So we have different classes of sugar, but you should understand that glucose is a 6-carbon sugar, and you can see the engine name of glycolysis. It is actually lysis. So actually what's happening here, we want to split glucose, we want to break glucose. Are you there? That's what glycolysis is all about, and glycolysis is a 10-step reaction pathway for it to start from glucose, breaking glucose into the last product, into the end product called pyruvic acid. It follows 10 steps. Are you there? But basically, I'm just telling you what's happening. For glucose to form pyruvic acid, it follows what? 10 steps. And all of these steps are enzymatic. All of these steps are what? Enzymatic. What does this mean? It means that all of these steps are powered by enzymes. And what are enzymes? Enzymes are organic biocatalysts that helps to speed up the rates of biological reactions. So you can see the overview of glycolysis, whereby glucose is converted to what? Pyruvic acid. So what's the end product of glycolysis? It is actually option A, which is what? Pyruvic acid. I believe the concept is clear. It's very simple. All right. Now you should understand here that there is a part of the cell, be it plant and animal cells, all right, that glycolysis occurs. All right. Glycolysis occurs. Listen carefully. Glycolysis occurs in a part of the cell called the cytoplasm. Please take note of this. If they ask you where does glycolysis occurs, what will you say? It occurs in the cytoplasm of a cell. But if you are asked where does Krebs cycle occurs, you will simply say that Krebs cycle occurs in the powerhouse of a cell, which is called the mitochondria. So all these must be noted. So let's get into the next practice question, which is during the bending of the arm. All right. So first of all, you have to know what arm means. It is very important, and I believe you understand what bending means. I'm going to explain properly. But the question says, during the bending of the arm, the biceps muscle, they now give us option. So they're not asking us, when we bend our arm, what happens to the biceps muscle? I'm going to explain all of this, so just listen carefully. All right, this must be noted. Whenever you hear arm basically starts from the shoulder. All right, the shoulder blade up to the phalanges, up to the hand. From here down to here is not your hand, this is your hand. Are you there? So the arm starts from the shoulder blade. There's a joint here that connects the shoulder blade and the clavicle bone. All right, this is clavicle bone or the collarbone. So arm starts from here down to the hand. So this is your arm. Then I said bending of the arm. All right. During bending, I'm going to tell you what bending means. This bending of the arm, this is your arm. So you are bending it. I believe you can see me. You are bending the arm. I believe you can see me. You are bending. See, this is bending. I'm going to talk about something else in the course of this lesson. So just listen carefully. So now said during bending of the arm, what happens to the biceps muscle? First of all, it's important for you to know where the biceps muscle is found in the body. And as well, there is another muscle that work against the biceps muscle. I'm going to talk about all this, so listen carefully. Now listen carefully. This muscle here, there's a muscle here that, you know, this, there's a bone here. The bone is called the humerus. The bone starts from the, you know, the shoulder down till this joint, which is the elbow joint, and that bone is called what? The humerus. So there is a muscle on top of the humerus.
All right, this must be noted. All right, so on description of the location of this muscle, which are the biceps and the tricep muscle, in respect to the humerus bone, this must be noted. All right, so if we want to like describe the location of the bicep muscle, we simply say that the bicep muscle is located anteriorly, are you there, or anterior to the humerus bone. The word anterior simply means in front of the humerus bone. Are you there? Now that's for the bicep muscle. But moving over to the tricep muscle, you know, the tricep muscle is located down, you get. So we simply say that the tricep muscle is located posterior to the humerus bone. The word posterior simply means back of the humerus bone. I believe you can see where I, you know, showed you in the video lesson. So let us progress.
All right, I don't want to use anatomical terms here. I want to just use basic terms. So on top of the humerus, there's a muscle here. That muscle is called the bicep muscle. So under the bicep muscle, this muscle is called the triceps muscle. So as we're having the biceps, also we're having the triceps. So you should understand what is happening. We have another muscle called the triceps muscle. All right. The question now says, bending of the arm. What happens to the bicep muscles? If you read all of the options, you can see they are still talking about the biceps muscle. So before we come to the options, just understand, we are going to understand properly whenever we bend our arm. What happens to these two muscles? I believe you already know where they are found. For the biceps, this is the triceps. So bending means flexion. Take note. Now flexion can be a big term, but you should just know that flexion means something like this: flexing. This flexion, where we have another one called extension, like this, extending it. So that can also be regarded as called straightening of the arm. You are trying to straighten the arm. That's extending the arm. But flexion, you are bringing it together, you are bending it. So look at what I said. When you are bending your arm, what happens to this muscle? So remember I told you that the muscle here is the biceps. The one here is the tricep. So this bicep, when you try to bend it, what happens to it? You are contracting it. When you bend now, you are contracting the muscle, or you are trying to shorten the muscle. And as well as when you are doing this muscle is being relaxed. Yes, it is being relaxed. The muscle down is being relaxed. This is the tricep. When you bend it like this muscle, which is the biceps, becomes contracted, comes together. Do you understand what that's the word contracted means? But when you still do it like this muscle down, which is the triceps, you relax it. So whenever bending of the arm occurs, what happens? You can see the question says, during bending of the arm, the bicep muscles contract. Yes, they contract. And as well as the tricep muscles relax. Yes, that's what happened. But if the question came in the other way around, that said that during straightening of the arm, so you are straightening the arm, what happens to the bicep? You are trying to relax this, and as well as you are contracting this one. You can see what's happening now. I'm trying to contract the one down, which is the tricep, but this one I'm trying to relax, which is the biceps. I believe you understand. This question is very easy. Just listen carefully, be able to solve them. All right, I believe you understand what happened here for we to get option A. Me, I don't need to read other options because they are not correct based on the question. But if it was straightening of the arm, it would have been option B, because you can see that when you straighten this one, bicep relax and tricep contracts. You understand? Try to what now? Tighten more. I believe you understand what's happening. It's very simple. Now, if you find my video lesson helpful, make sure you click on the subscribe button to my channel and also share my lessons to your friends. Don't just watch without even liking this video. Make sure you give this video a like and also subscribe and share this particular video with your friends. All right. So let's get into the next practice question. And the question says, the excretory structure in Earthworm is First of all, whenever you hear about excretory, there are structures, there are organs in organisms that help to remove waste. Are you there? Like in humans, the major excretory structure is the kidneys. Yes, though the skin is also an excretory structure. You can see I'm actually sweating now. So what is happening is the skin trying to what remove sweat. You understand, through the help of what the sweat gland that is found in the skin. But the major excretory organ in humans is the kidney. But they're not asking us in earthworm. First of all, you must know where earthworm belongs to when it comes to classification. Remember, earthworm is actually an animal. So earthworm will belong to the kingdom Animalia. Are you there? Earthworm belongs to what? Now, the kingdom Animalia. But specifically, it's an invertebrate. Remember, on kingdom Animalia, we have two major groups, which are the vertebrates and also the invertebrates. What are vertebrates? Vertebrates are organisms with what? Backbone. Inside the backbone, we have what the backbone actually, surround, which is called the spinal cord. So just understand here that vertebrates are organisms with what now? Backbone. Whereby invertebrates, they don't have backbone. What are examples of vertebrates? They include what we call pisces, which are the fishes. They include what we call amphibians, which include frogs. You understand, organisms that live a double life. Amphi, they live double life, like example frog, toad, and the rest. We have another called reptiles, like likes of crocodile and the rest, like chameleon. Remember, there's a pigment found in chameleon that helps it to change its color. That is called the chromatophore. Take note, it's called the chromatophore. Moving further, we have other examples of vertebrates, which include we mammals. We humans are mammals. We have backbones. Yes, even apes too, like the birds. So the way I remember vertebrates is by using this acronym PARAM. Listen carefully, PARAM, whereby P Pisces, A amphibians, R reptiles, the other A apes like birds, and N mammals. Are you there? So that is for vertebrates. But earthworm belongs to the invertebrate, which we have so many of them. But just understand here that earthworm basically belongs to an invertebrate group called the annelids. All right, so you must understand here that earthworm is actually an annelid, not just earthworm. We have other examples like leech. Leech is a parasitic annelid. Are you there? But you must understand that generally earthworm excretes with the help of a structure, with the help of an organ found in them, and it's called the nephridium. This must be noted. But it is important for me to analyze other options. All right, you can see that I said that humans basically excrete with the help of kidney. For Mapigian tubes, Mapigian tube basically is the excretory organs for insects. Are you there? And you should understand here that insects, they are examples of arthropods. All right, we have different subgroup under arthropods, or we can as well call them arthropoda. Remember, arthropoda is still an invertebrate alongside annelids. Are you there? But we have different groups of arthropods, which include insects, or we can call them insecta. We have other groups like the arachinda, arachids, like likes of spiders. We have other groups like the crustaceans, like likes of crabs. You understand? But you must understand here that insects generally excrete with the help of the Mapigian tubes. Whereby moving further, talking about flame cells. Flame cells is the excretory organ for flatworms. All right, they are the excretory organ for what? Flatworms. Take note, flatworms are not under annelids. Flatworm belongs to a separate invertebrate group called the platyhelminths, or we call them the platyhelminths. So please just note this as well. We've talked about the excretory organs in these organisms, all right, but you must know what they actually excrete out. Like humans, you can see one of the excretory products and it is sweat. Let's talk about the excretory products in earthworm. What does earthworm actually excrete out? Earthworm excretes what we call ammonia, all right, but ammonia in dilute form. Same applies to flatworm. They excrete what we call ammonia. But for insects, they excrete what we call uric acid. All this must be noted. But with the help of the kidney for humans, they excrete what? Urine. Are you there? So all this must be noted. So let's get into the next practice question. The next question says, a band of connective tissues linking two bones in a joint is basically called, let's say we split this thing, we just cut it and we have two parts. So they're not asking what will now join those two stuffs to form a joint, because whenever two bones meet, it forms a joint. Like what joins those bones together to form that joint is called the ligament. Please take note, this is very important. It is ligament that joins bones to bones, but what joins muscle to bones is called tendons. All right, tendons joins muscles to bones, whereby for synovial fluid this is quite different. This is a fluid that is found in synovial joints. What are synovial joints? These are joints that are freely movable, like the joints of the elbow, like the joints of the knees. They are all examples of synovial joints. All right, they are joints that are found between bones that can move, like the elbow. You can see I can move it. It's a movable joint. So the fluid here is called the synovial fluid. And what's the function of this fluid called the synovial fluid? One of the function is for lubrication. In the case of friction, you can see how I'm moving the joint. The reason for that is to reduce friction. You can see that due to the presence of that fluid, that's why I can move it without any form of pain. Are you there? There are other functions of the synovial fluid, which include shock absorption. In the case of, let's say for instance, there is a trauma to the elbow. Let's say you hit the elbow somewhere. So because of the presence of that fluid, the impact of that trauma will be reduced in a little amount, though you will feel pain, but due to the presence of synovial fluid, you actually reduce the the pain, but there will still be pain, you get. So the synovial fluid is very, very important. Moving over to the next practice question number 6, it says oozing out of water. Oozing means removal of something. So oozing out of water, removal of water from the leaves of plants in humid environments is called, listen, it's called guttation. Please take note, it's called guttation. Don't mistake guttation with transpiration. Transpiration is the removal of water vapor, not just water. I believe you are following me. Transpiration is the removal of what? Water vapor and not just water. Whereby pinocytosis is something different, and osmosis basically is the movement of water. This one, you are not removing water, it's the movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration. Osmosis is a cell process. It is different from guttation and transpiration, and this also pinocytosis is different. In subsequent questions to be solved in this lesson, I'm going to explain all of this, so listen carefully. So let's get into the next practice questions. Okay guys, moving further, let's get into the next practice question, and it says, what is pinocytosis? All right, all of these things are very simple. From the word cytosis, it has to do with the cell. Are you there? But you must understand here that in the process pinocytosis, it's basically a process whereby the cell itself engulfs, all right, listen, because you have to understand what is happening in pinocytosis. So it is a process whereby the cell engulfs, fluids, engulfs liquid substances. Are you there? You can see for pinocytosis, it has to do with when the cell engulfs, liquid substances. That is why pinocytosis sometimes can also be regarded to be called the cell drinking. All right. So for pinocytosis, it has to do with engulfing liquid. And one of the major reasons for doing this is to balance the internal environment of the cell and as well process nutrients all around the cell. So you must understand here that for pinocytosis, it is cell drinking. Moving over to phagocytosis. For phagocytosis, there is still engulfing of substances, but you must know here that for phagocytosis, it has to do with engulfing substances like food, substances like debris. So one of the difference between pino and phagocytosis is basically the size of what is being engulfed. Are you there? For pinocytosis, it has to do with engulfing substances with small size, whereby for phagocytosis, it has to do with engulfing of substances with large size like food, like debris. And also in phagocytosis, it also has to do with engulfing pathogens, things that can cause harm to the cell. So through the process phagocytosis, there will be engulfment of those pathogens, and the specialized cells that does this engulfment of pathogens are called macrophages. Please take note during the process phagocytosis. So one of the difference between them is that this one engulfs liquid substances with small size. This one engulfs larger substances like food, like debris, like debris has to do with waste. Are you there?
All right. So, in summary about this process called phagocytosis, as earlier said, we said that is a process whereby the cell engulfs, solid particles, which include food. It can be, debris. Debris are waste products, and also it can be pathogens. Remember, we said that pathogens are what causes diseases. I believe you are following me. Now, here is a brief summary about how the process phagocytosis works. The way this process works is actually, first of all, the cell will recognize this, foreign body. In the case of the cell trying to destroy, debris, pathogens, all of these are things that are not good for the cell. So first of all, the cell will recognize that foreign body. Are you there? After recognition of that foreign body, then the cell will engulf it. Are you there? The cell will surround it. Are you there? And after the cell engulfs it, next thing the cell does is to now start digesting it. You understand? Start breaking it down. So that's how phagocytosis works. After breaking it down, the cell now excretes it. Do you understand? So the foreign body will be excreted as a waste. Do you understand? So all this must be noted.
Moving further, with my explanation, you answer question 9 and question 10. All right. I'm not going to say much. It's very simple. Question 9, during pinocytosis, liquid substance is engulfed. Is that true? For my explanation, you can answer it without stress. Question 10, what is engulfed, all right, during phagocytosis? I've listed so many things that can be engulfed during phagocytosis. So answer questions on the board. So let's get into the next practice question. And it says, the central nervous system consists of the brain stem and spinal cord. Wow. This question is simple but tricky. The answer to this question is false. You can't tell me that the central nervous system, consists of the brain stem. Brain stem is one part of the brain. Alright, don't be confused. This question is simple, but you have to be careful. They said the central nervous system, which is the CNS, consists of the brain stem and the spinal cord. It is false. If they had said the brain itself and the spinal cord, then this statement will be true. Alright, you can see actually the brain stem is one part of the brain. The brain is divided into different parts. Alright, the brain stem is one part of it, and the brain stem is found underneath at the base, under the brain. It's like the last part of the brain that connects the spinal cord. You see the diagram here. The brain stem itself is divided into different parts. There is one part called the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata basically controls involuntary actions. Are you there? There's another part called the pons varuli, and also there is another part called the midbrain. The midbrain basically controls, hearing. The midbrain controls alertness. Are you there? Remember, the brain has different parts, which include the forebrain, which include the midbrain and the hindbrain. Are you there? Remember, for the forebrain, it has different parts, which include the cerebrum, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus. Remember, the cerebrum basically helps to control intelligence, consciousness, ability for you to answer exam questions correctly. Alright, whereby for the hypothalamus, it basically controls hunger, it controls thirst, it controls body temperature, it also controls the release of hormones as well. That's for the hypothalamus. I've talked about the function of the cerebrum and the hypothalamus only. There are other parts and their functions. I'm not talking about the brain structures and the functions, all right, but I'm just telling you this so that in case you see them in your exam questions, you can answer them without stress. So I believe you know why the answer is actually false. All right, moving over to the next question. It says bacteria grows rapidly. All right, what they meant by this, what process does bacteria use to grow rapidly, to reproduce? Basically, it's done by a process called binary fission. All right, take note, it's called binary fission. Fission means splitting, and binary. Are you there? So all these must be noted. So let's get into the next practice question, and it says, what divides the thoracic and the abdominal cavity? All right, the thoracic cavity is the chest cavity. The abdominal cavity, like where the stomach is found and the rest, that's the abdominal cavity, the abdomen. What divides them is a muscle, and that muscle is called diaphragm. All these must be noted. So let's get into the next practice question, and it says, dash hormone in the body produces growth hormone. The question is very simple. All right, growth hormone is produced by, all right, remember in one of my video lessons here on my channel, I've explained everything you must know about hormones, and there's something that actually produces hormones. They are called endocrine glands. At the end of watching this lesson, I'm going to put the lesson here so you can see the lesson and go watch the video lesson to learn everything you must know about hormones. Are you there? It's very, very simplified. Moving further, you must understand here that growth hormones are produced by a gland. Listen, by a gland called the pituitary gland. That pituitary gland is found at the base of the forebrain, under the forebrain. Are you there? Now, the pituitary gland is of two parts, two lobes. We have the anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland. In that video lesson, I explained everything. For the anterior, it produces several hormones, and growth hormone is part of it. So growth hormone is produced by the pituitary gland. Listen, by the pituitary gland, but specifically the anterior pituitary gland. There are other hormones produced by the anterior pituitary gland, which include the LH hormone, luteinizing hormone, which include the FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, which include the ACTH, the adrenocorticotropic hormone. All right, there are so many hormones like that. But for the posterior part of the pituitary gland, all right, it produces just two hormones, which are oxytocin, and as well as another hormone called antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin. All right, so all this must be noted. Let's get into the next practice question. So make sure you go watch my video lesson on hormones. All right, the video will be here. So let's get into the next practice question. Moving further, the next question says, the organ situated in the pericardial cavity. Anything that has to do with cardiac heart. All right, so there is an organ that is found within cavities, covers organs. So the cavity that actually covers the heart is called the pericardial cavity. That's why the answer is the heart. Moving further, question number 16 says, the interaction between organism of a community and its abiotic component forms the ecosystem. Remember, in one of my video lessons, I've explained the ecosystem. Remember, I told you that the ecosystem is a self-supporting system that connects two components, which include the biotic component and as well as the abiotic. The biotic component is one that contains the organism, all right? The abiotic component are those climatic, components, rainfall, you understand. We have so many of them, relative humidity. The abiotic components are those components that doesn't have light in them. So when they actually interact with, the biotic component, which is the living component, which is the living organism here, they form a system called the ecosystem. And this ecosystem is a self-supporting system, all right? So let's get into the next practice question. Moving over to the next practice question, and it says, dash instrument measures relative humidity. It's simply called the hygrometer. It's not hydro, it's called hygrometer. All right, if it was hydro, that will be
related to measuring the specific gravity of water. If you don't call it specific gravity, you can as well call it the density of water. So that is what hydrometer measures, not relative humidity. For relative humidity, it is measured by the instrument called the hygrometer. So all this must be noted.
What is used to catch more insects is called potter. All right, it will be spelled here. All right, moving over to the next question. It says, the gland directly affecting metabolic rate, growth and development in the body is simply called the thyroid gland. All right, the thyroid gland is located at the neck region. The thyroid gland produces several hormones, which include the T3 hormone, the T4 hormone, and as well as what we call calcitonin. For the T3 hormone, it's called triiodothyronine T4 thyroxine hormone. All of this hormone helps in metabolism. And if there is metabolism, All right, it will lead to growth and development. I've explained all this in that video lesson that I talked about hormones. So the video so where you see the explanation is one of my 40 JAMB likely biology question, and it is the first question I solved in that lesson. All right, I'll put the video here so you can locate that video and watch it to understand everything you must know about hormones, because we have so many hormones in the body. So the gland that is directly associated with metabolism, growth, is simply the thyroid gland, and it is located in the neck region. All right, moving over to the next question. It says the basic structural and functional unit of the nervous system is called neurons. All right, remember, neurons are also regarded to be called nerve cells. Remember, nerve cells has different parts. All right, in subsequent lesson, I'm going to talk about those things. All right. Moving further to the next question, and it says the mammalian organ which acts as both digestive and endocrine organ. I've said this in that lesson as well. Now, there is a gland in the human body that has two functions. Normally glands that produces hormones, they are called endocrine glands. Glands that produces enzymes, they are called exocrine glands. But there is a gland that possesses these two functions. It has the ability to produce enzymes. All right, what I meant by this is digestive enzymes. All right, so you can see from the word digestive, whenever you hear digestive, it has to do with enzymes. All right, because it is enzymes that have the ability to digest this food that is being taken, that is being ingested by we humans, animals. Are you there? So there is a gland in the body that helps to produce enzymes and also helps to produce hormones. That's the endocrine function. A gland has two functions. We have the exocrine function, which basically helps to produce enzymes, and endocrine function, which helps to produce hormones. What are the hormones that this gland produces? They are the insulin, glucagon, somatostatin. What are the enzymes does this same gland produces? All right, they are the amylase, protease, and lipase. So there is a gland that has this function. That gland is called the pancreas gland. Please take note, it's very, very important. The gland is simply called the pancreas gland. It has the ability to produce both enzymes and hormones. And when you produce hormones, what function is that? Endocrine function. But when you produce digestive enzymes, what function is that? Exocrine function. We've talked about this in that lesson. And so many other glands that, the questions are not here. All right. They are in the other lesson. All right. Questions on hormones. So make sure you go watch that lesson to understand perfectly everything that is happening about hormones. Now, moving further, you can see the next question. 22 says photosynthesis is to chloroplast as dash is to mitochondria. All right, so what they're trying to say here is this: it is chloroplast that actually helps in photosynthesis. So what does mitochondria helps in? What does mitochondria helps in doing? It basically helps in energy production and also very important process in the human body called respiration. So the answer will be respiration, because actually respiration leads to energy production. Are you there? So all this must be noted. It's very simple. I had a video lesson here on my channel where I explains about cell and all of these structures. They are actually called organelles in a cell: mitochondria, chloroplast, ribosome. There are so many. You'll see the video here, so you watch it about cell structure and cell function. So let's get into the next practice question, and it says vitamin B1 is called, all right, vitamin B1 basically is called thiamine. Please, I did not say vitamin B1 is called thymine. Thymine is a nitrogenous base. All right, vitamin B1 is called thiamine. Thymine is a nitrogenous base found in DNA strands. All right, those genetic materials. Moving over to the next practice question, and it says vitamin A is called retinol. Take note, though there are other species like retinoic acid, retinal, but majorly vitamin A is called retinol. Moving over to the next question, it says, what are the fat-soluble vitamins? These are vitamins that are soluble in just fat substances. They are called the ADEC: vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. These are the fat-soluble vitamins. Moving over to the next question, it says, what are the water-soluble vitamins? They are simply vitamin Bs and vitamin C. Are you there? We have many Bs. The B complexes: vitamin B1, vitamin B2, vitamin B3, vitamin B5, B6, yeah, vitamin B7, B9, B12. All right, these are the examples of vitamin, and they have names. I'll talk about them subsequently. However, for vitamin C is called ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid. This must be noted. It is a water-soluble vitamin. Moving over to the next practice question, and it says vitamin B2 is called, all right, the answer to this question is called riboflavin. All right, riboflavin. All right, moving over to the next practice question, it says vitamin B12 is called cobalamin. Cobalamin. Actually, we have so many species of cobalamin. We have the cyanocobalamin, we have the methylcobalamin. There are so many species of cobalamin, but B12 majorly is called cobalamin. Moving over to the next practice question, and it says vitamin B9 basically is called folic acid. All right, folic acid, that's vitamin B9. Whether I'm moving over to the next practice question, vitamin D is called calciferol. All right, calciferol is vitamin D. It has to do with calcium absorption. All right, so all this must be noted. Let's get into the next practice questions.
To have more understanding about chemistry calculations and solving all of these type of questions, I already have them on the chemistry masterpiece, okay, which is calculations and keynotes in chemistry. So if you are preparing to write the JAMB exam, this book is very, very important for you. Now, for more information getting the chemistry masterpiece, do well to direct message me via my WhatsApp number. It will be on the screen.
Okay, guys, moving over to the next practice question. The question says, what is a gene? Now, you must understand here that genes are found in what we call DNA. First of all, that's something you should know. So these genes are found in what? The DNA structure. So genes are like segments of the DNA. So when we draw the DNA structure, when we take one part of the DNA structure, that is called the gene. Are you there? Now, you must understand here that gene is like the basic unit of heredity. Gene is what determines the traits that will be passed from the parents to the offsprings. Are you there? So genes determine traits. That's something you should know. Traits like, the color of the hair, the color of the hair, and also height. You understand? All of these are traits, and they are all determined by gene. Remember, I said that gene is part of the DNA strand. Remember, the DNA is made up of, different structures. Now, listen carefully. The DNA is made up of three parts majorly. On description, the DNA is a double helical structure, all right? But it is made up of three structures, which include what we call the phosphate group. Take note, what we call the phosphate group. That is one part of the DNA structure. Remember, where is the DNA found in a cell? The DNA is found inside the nucleus. On my video lesson on cell structure and functions, I explained all of this. So here is a video. At the end of watching this lesson, make sure you go watch that video, all right? So this is one part of the DNA structure, which is the phosphate group. Another is what we call sugar, but to be specific, the sugar is a pentose sugar. What is a pentose sugar? A pentose sugar is a 5-carbon sugar. Are you there? And in DNA, the sugar specifically we are talking about here is called deoxyribose. All right, it's called deoxyribose. And lastly, DNA is made up of what we call nitrogenous bases. We call them nitrogenous bases. All right, what are these nitrogenous bases DNA is made up of? All right, for DNA molecule, it is made up of what we call nitrogenous bases, which are the A, T, also C and G. What are they? They have names. A is called adenine. This is a nitrogenous base. T is called thymine. Remember I talked about this. I told you that it is a nitrogenous base found in DNA molecule, and thymine is not vitamin B1. What is vitamin B1? Thiamine. We talked about that. What is C? C is called cytosine. And what is G? G is called guanine. Are you there? And if you want to pair them, they pair like this. AT, all right, and also what now? CG. These are the way they pair in the DNA structure. If I'm to draw it, they pair like this, all right. Adenine pairs to thymine, and cytosine pairs to guanine. Now, note this. You might be asked, all right. The way this, nitrogenous base pair together, they pair with the help of a bond. Something holds them together. Now, listen carefully. Adenine pairs to thymine with a double bond, all right? This is the bond, double. But if it's between cytosine and guanine, C to G, is a triple bond. Now, this bond that I'm talking about, all of them, they are all called hydrogen bond. So you can be asked, what type of bond is seen in a DNA molecule in general? What will you say? Hydrogen bond. Same applies to RNA molecule, which I'll talk about. Now, just listen carefully. I believe you are following me. So all this must be noted about the DNA strand. Now, moving further, now you can see the makeup of the DNA. Now, please note this. All of I can simply tell you that the DNA molecule is made up of what we call nucleotide. Now, the nucleotide is what gave rise to these three structures, which include the phosphate group, the sugar, and nitrogenous base. So nucleotide gave rise to all of them. Nucleotide. I did not say nucleoside. So nucleotide is simply phosphate group, is simply sugar, and is simply nitrogenous base. I believe you are following me. But for instance, you see another term that looks like nucleotide, and that term is nucleoside. Please don't get confused. For nucleoside is simply sugar molecule and as well as nitrogenous base. So in nucleoside, there is no phosphate group, but in nucleotide, there is phosphate group. I believe you've seen the difference between these two terminologies, because these are some terms you will see in the topic genetics, so it's important for you to understand all of these things. Now, moving further, let's quickly talk about the RNA molecule, all right? RNA molecule. Remember, RNA basically is called ribonucleic acid. So you must understand here that it's still same components. You must note here that it's made up of phosphate group, is made up of sugar, but now the sugar is simply ribose. Ribose is still a 5-carbon sugar, but for DNA is deoxyribose. RNA is ribose. Are you there? And as well, it's made up of what? Nitrogenous bases. But it is the nitrogenous bases I'm going to stress on RNA molecule. So let's come here. So what are the nitrogenous bases? Remember, I call them for DNA ATCG. But take note, for the nitrogenous base in RNA, they are basically, look at the name, AUCG. Are you following me? Now, if you observe in
DNA molecule,
we've removed the T and replaced it with what we call uracil. Please take note. These things are very, very important. Now, this must be noted. The way we explain the bonding system between the nitrogenous bases, it applies here also. All right. For this is A to U with a double hydrogen bond. All right. Whereby C to G with a triple hydrogen bond. Now, there's something I have to tell you, all right? In DNA molecule and RNA molecule, we have two major types of bonds, which are covalent bond and as well as hydrogen bond. I believe you can see the hydrogen bond. I've talked about them. But for the covalent bond specifically, is a covalent phosphodiester bond. Please just note this thing is very important. So with all of this explanation, I believe you've understood the concept about DNA and RNA strand. Though we can also draw the structure, but you must understand here that DNA has a double helical structure. RNA has a single structure. For DNA double, RNA single, all right? So let's get into the next practice question, which says, what does the term genotype means, all right? Genotypes are basically determined by the gene. Are you there? All right. The genotype of an individual is determined by the type of gene present in that individual. So genotypes basically are the genes found in the individual. Are you there? Whereby, moving over to the next question, which is phenotype. Phenotype are those observable traits. Remember, what gave rise to those traits? It is the gene. Are you there? So the phenotype are those things we can see. Like, for instance, the color of the eyeball of that individual, which is determined by this type of gene present in that individual. The height of that individual, which is also determined by the type of gene present in that individual. Are you there? So all this must be noted. Phenotype are those observable traits you see in that individual. Are you there? And all these observable traits are determined by the gene present in the individual. Moving over to the next practice question, question number 34, and it says, what is mutation? Mutation has to do with the changes in the DNA of an individual, and most of the time, these changes results in a disease condition. Are you there? Because now there is a mistake in the genetic makeup of that individual. It leads to a disease. We have so many, diseases that are caused as a result of, changes in DNA of that individual, like Down syndrome, like the Klinefelter syndrome. There are so many of them. So all this must be noted. Now, moving over to the next practice question, and it says, what are dominant genes? All right. Dominant genes, from the word dominant, they are strong genes.
Alright, this must be noted. Before I start explaining to you what dominant genes and as well as recessive genes mean, actually what brought about these genes actually came into the picture during sexual reproduction between the male and the female. Are you there? So when there is sexual reproduction between the male and female, this process leads to the transfer of genes. Are you there? One copy of gene from the male and another one copy of gene from the female. So these genes then comes together to form the trait of the baby to be born. Are you there? So all this must be noted. So this gene we're talking about can be dominant or recessive. So listen carefully.
So dominant genes are genes that still possesses its character, though it is only coming from, let's say for instance, the male or the female, the father or the mother. But you must understand here that dominant genes are strong genes. Even if they are one in, they only came from the male, it will still
Dominate in that individual.
Now let's take for instance, all right, let's say this, it is the mother and the father that will come together to give rise to the offspring, the infants, you understand? And let's say the father has a brown eyes, you understand? And when they gave birth to this, infant, they now found out that that baby has brown eyes. So you can see that the father has a gene that's dominated in that baby. That's a dominant gene. You understand? It's only coming from the father, but that gene still showed up in the individual that was given birth to. So we say that that gene is a dominant gene. So from the word dominant, the opposite is recessive. Recessive genes are, genes that are not strong. All right. For them to actually, show up in the trait of an individual, it must come from both parents, both the male and the female. Let's say, for instance, both male and female has blue eyes. Then they give birth to the child. The child is supposed to still have blue eyes. You get that's a recessive gene. If maybe, for instance, the father has blue eyes and the mother does not, the tendency of the baby to have blue eyes is below. That's a recessive gene. I'm just giving you an example, so all this must be noted. So in summary, for dominant gene, you only need one copy of the gene, let's say coming from the father or the mother, for it to show up in the traits of that individual. For recessive, you need both of them for it to actually show up in the trait of that individual. Are you there? Now, moving further to the next question, it says, how many chromosomes do humans have? All right, we humans, we have 46 chromosomes. Are you there? Remember, chromosomes are arranged in pair. In what pair? So now this other question says, how many pairs of chromosomes do we have? We have 23 pairs of what chromosome. Remember, when you split them, all right, remember the pair has 2 in it. All right, so when you now split them, count them individually, you get 46. But when you count them in pair, there are 23 pairs of chromosome. Are you there? So all this must be noted. Moving over to the next question, which says, what are
Alleles?
all right, what are alleles? This question is very simple. Now, this must be noted. Alleles are like, different versions of a gene. We have different types of genes. Genes for, the eye color. You understand? Yeah, genes for eye color, for instance. So when we talk about alleles, now is the different, version of the gene. So the different version of this, now this is a gene and determines eye color of that individual. So alleles like different version of that eye color. We have eye color that can be brown. We have, I'm using eye color as a case study. We can use hair color. You understand? We can use height of that individual. So brown eye color. We have blue eye color. Do you understand? So allele basically are different version of a gene. Are you there? So I believe you understand what I mean by alleles. All right, they are different versions of a gene. This is a gene that this is a gene that gives rise to the eye color of an individual. So this eye color can be of different types, and what it means, those different versions of different types of that particular gene is the allele. Are you there? So next question number 40 says, what is genetic inheritance? Very simple. It is a process whereby these genes, these characteristics, these traits, all right, are passed from parents to offspring. All right. So if you find my video lesson helpful, make sure you click on the subscribe button to my channel and also share my lessons to friends. Make sure you subscribe, all right, and also make sure you share my videos to friends. Thanks for watching.